Hi, I'm Francesca. Welcome. This is a Rialto channel podcast. And of course, this month, throughout February, on Rialto Documentary, on Thursday evenings, we're screening documentaries about inspiring Kiwis. And today our subject is a remarkable woman called Margaret Lee. And the documentary is called Where There Is Life. And Gwen Isaac joins me now. And Gwen, you are the producer, the director. What else did you do on board this production?
Camera operator, sound recordist, everything. It was a one-woman band setup, which went really well. It ensures that your relationships with your characters is authentic and intimate.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it was the right thing to do.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about the documentary Where There Is Life.
So Where There Is Life started as essentially a gift to a random woman I met in a gym to her 10-year-old. I was told through a mutual friend that she had just received news she had a terminal illness and not long to live, and that as a mum, I thought I have to do something. She just looked across the crowded gym. She just looked to be somebody who had a very unique perspective on that news. She didn't look upset or traumatized. She looked celebratory. So I approached her and offered to make a little video for her daughter so that she'd always remember her mother. And then, 6 years later, ended up with 120 hours of footage and enough for a feature doc. I decided at that point, so 4 years in, that it was that it was a film, and it could also narratively follow the huge sacrifice that her husband makes to ensure that she has quality of life and death. So it turned into sort of more of a film from his perspective than hers as it transpired.
So did you know much about motor neuron disease before shooting this film?
I had a friend's mother be afflicted with it, and I could decided at that point that was pretty much the worst way to go for yourself and those around you due to the locked-in syndrome aspect of it. Your body shuts down slowly, and your mind is intact, but you can't communicate. You can't do anything for yourself, and I was morbidly fascinated. So it had been something I wanted to understand a bit better, and so that's, the disease is secondary to how she reacts to it and how her husband sacrifices just about everything, including his mental health, to look after her. But yeah, I still think it's a very horrible disease.
Well, and I think what's really interesting is because you did film for such a long period of time, we do get to meet Margaret maybe more as herself. So you get a better understanding of what it was like for her husband caring for her and for her daughter to watch her mum go through the disease.
Yes.
In the sense that, there's footage in there of Margaret when she's still able to talk to you and share her thoughts on camera and things. And we see a very bubbly woman. And I think that creates quite an impact as we watch her change and the challenges that faces for Imogen and her husband.
Well, hopefully, because we had that early footage of her, as the big personality she was, you can, as a viewer, withstand some of the grisliest stuff. And, clearly the Imogen is experiencing an entirely different version of her mother in adolescence, which I think is a pretty difficult time anyway. So that trilogy of how the three of them move in that house, mainly, as you could see, Francesca, it's all shot in that one house, gives you a sort of, like you said, a comprehensive view, but also just of families under pressure. That's the illness was the reason I got involved, but how the microcosm of the family reacting to such a slow, intense thing fascinated me. But yes, so I don't know if that answers your question.
But when you decided after you said to Margaret, I'd love to make this film for Imogen, and then when you realised that there was another story here and that her husband sort of became the focus of the film. Were the family open to you continuing to film?
They were incredibly generous, Francesca. This would never have happened if we hadn't had such a trusting, open, honest dialogue throughout. It's very unusual to be allowed to be hanging around a camera with a camera while someone's dying slowly of in that particular way. So I was very grateful. It certainly helped that I think Stephen became isolated from everybody anyway. So him and I, he had someone to talk to. Margaret, I'd known, when she could still jump around. So I became part of the furniture, I think, because they allowed me and they were generous people. But, correspondingly, I had to do a good job of telling their story kindly and sensitively. So that's the exchange for any observational filmmaker historically. It's that tension between being respectful of the content, but not sugarcoating it. It's not that you can sugarcoat motor neurone disease. And I really wanted to convey what Stephen, his mental state throughout, very, very extreme mood changes, as you can imagine, someone who doesn't get any sleep and is alone. And the health professionals they had around them were amazing as well, but just couldn't fit all that in. So in no way is it here's how to cope with the DHB. You've got a member of your family dying. It's certainly not that. It's certainly just one slither of a very multifaceted experience.
As you said, all mostly centred around their home. It's a very intimate portrayal, isn't it? And that's interesting. You talk about that. It is an observational. You have a background in observational and social history documentaries, but as you say, you've got to rely on an awful amount of trust and honesty and friendship with your subject. I'm curious to know how maybe John Sylvester contributed to the film when it came to editing, somebody who wasn't quite so close to that day-to-day shooting.
It was great having him. If it wasn't for John, the film never would have been finished. He took on under the tutelage of Annie Collins, who's a very respected and experienced editor in this country, 120 hours of footage, and he crafted something unique. He supported me emotionally. He was just fresh out of film school, first gig really, but he wasn't daunted, and I'm hoping to make all my other films with John because he's very patient and very bright, yeah. Lucky to have him.
So 120 minutes of footage, did you say, down to about 80 minutes?
No, 120 hours.
80 minutes. Goodness gracious, Gwen.
That's not a very, normally, yeah, it's about right, but I would have liked more. But yeah, it's just, that's the way it goes. You just start with quite a porridge soup, basically, of footage, and then can refine it. I didn't know what I was doing, to be frank, Francesca. I had no experience making anything long form. My background's BBC, ITV, UK documentaries. For half hours and for broadcast. So this, I just had to take it on to do it and move on to something else that I could feed all that experience into. So for that, I'm grateful, and I hope people get out of the film that the human experience is something so unique, sheds light on all of us really as human beings, the human condition, in an inspiring way, I hope. I mean, it is, grueling, as you said to me earlier, but it's worth it, I think. I think you walk away thinking, well, I did. I hope I meet someone who would do that for me. I think that's the definition of a love story. If you can take that on, that's it. You've met the right person.
Actually, you know what? That's a really good description of this film. I mean, I can't imagine that there's a dry eye at the end of the screenings, but actually, you're right. It's a love story. There is a very uplifting and beautiful story in Where There Is Life. How did Stephen, not Margaret necessarily, but how did Stephen and Imogen feel about the final product?
Well, Imogen was key to it having a life outside of my study, really. She was 10 when we began filming, and then so she wasn't able to sign her own contributor release form. And then by the time I'd finished, she was 16 and legally allowed to put the brakes on it, really, if she wanted to. But she gave it her blessing, and Stephen came to all the screenings at the film festival and has been incredibly supportive. I think for him, he was very isolated, looking after Margaret, and he was, although there was support there, he was alone for the most part, and I think it gave him a chance to show people what he'd been through. I mean, he's a very special human being that he doesn't, his privacy was sacrificed for that ends, but he got, I think, enough out of it to be able to withstand that onslaught.
Well, absolutely, and I'm sure his journey has resonated with a lot of people who are also in that position of undergoing that physical, emotional, and mental toll of caring for someone with a terminal illness.
There are 800 new carers every year in New Zealand, so it's something we need to really think about.
Absolutely. So you mentioned that this was, you said just before, look, I learned on the job essentially. So what did you learn about making a feature-length documentary?
I learned that you have to be extremely patient and you have no control a lot of the time. That was something I had to let go of. Technically, I upskilled massively, and I think that my caveat to myself was that you're spending so much time with these people over a long period of time, which is kind of longitudinal anthropological study I'm interested in, that you have to really fall in love with them. And I did fall in love with Petra Brett Kelly says the same thing. I fell in love with Margaret and Stephen and Imogen, had, and so that's really important. So that's my, going forward, looking for people I really resonate with, because it is a massive undertaking.
And Gwen, when you were shooting this, you had a baby, I think, and a toddler. Is that right?
I had yes, all through it. Actually, it was Margaret who encouraged me to have another baby.
Bless her. What amazing legacy.
She also came up with the name. Hope. Hope was the name of the daughter I had when I was. And sadly, Hope's a beautiful baby, and I'm really pleased I had her. But she presented quite a technical problem where I didn't have any real help around then because I just moved back to New Zealand. Been away, so she gurgles a lot through some of the footage. So she was a very expensive addition to the sound mix at Park Road Post. But nonetheless, it was very very poignant, visceral times through Margaret going downhill, and it was. It's unforgettable stuff, really. So. Yeah, life-changing experience making that film. But I am keen to, make about 25 more before.
I like it, Gwen. I like the ambition. 25 more before when?
Well, I'm in nappies myself, I think. Which is, probably going to be sooner than any of us predict these days. The stresses of life. And filmmaking is, you probably found out from speaking to a few of us, isn't very lucrative for the most part. So, you have to do a few other things at the same time.
I was curious, did you say it was 6 years in total, this project?
Yes.
Yeah. So I would say from my unscientific survey that I've done over the last 15 years talking to New Zealand filmmakers, generally 7 years is the average length of time it takes to make a film from its origins through to completion, which isn't positive.
Actually, you're absolutely right. That's the statistic that I was released when I was living in Hollywood. That was the LA Times printed that. So you're entirely on point there. So it doesn't seem to be money doesn't seem to make any difference either. I've noticed. You can be Peter Jackson or at the other end of the scale me, and it still takes that long.
So Gwen, have you got anything in your mind at the moment, or whatever you have in your mind, do you just want to keep it hidden away there?
I've just got back from Japan on a feasibility study for my next film, which is pretty ambitious undertaking, but I think I'm keen. I did quite a bit of filming there. Exciting prospects for another feature coming out of there. It's definitely going to be in the same kind of challenging content framework. I might make a film about a New Zealand restaurateur over there as well, just to balance out the universe a bit. He's very glamorous and inspiring and ambitious. He's doing great things over there, so we'll see. It's a lot of balls in the air at the minute.
Oh, look, can't wait to see what comes next, Gwen. And thank you for your very poignant and beautiful film about Margaret Lee and her husband, Stephen and Imogen. The film was called Where There Is Life, and it screens on Thursday, the 21st of February at 8:30 p.m. on Rialto Channel.